Hello and welcome to the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office. I'm Eylon Levy. Today is May 26th, 2024. It is day 233 of the October 7th war. In just the last hour, Hamas fired rockets from the Gaza Strip towards the greater Tel Aviv area, setting off sirens. The rockets were fired from the city of Rafa. As Hamas uses Rafa as a base for attacking Israel, there is an intense international campaign to force Israel to stop its military operations in Rafa and create a safe zone for Hamas to keep attacking Israel's people. But it is a campaign that is not based in law and not based in fact. I want to give you some news about Rafa that may surprise you. The International Court of Justice ruled last Friday that Israel can continue to pursue the Hamas terror regime everywhere in Gaza, including in Rafa. Now, I'm sure you heard the opposite happen. And that's because these were the headlines just 2 days ago. New York Times, top UN court orders Israel to halt its assault on Rafah. Washington Post, UN's top court rules that Israel must immediately halt Rafah offensive. CNN, UN's top court orders Israel to halt its operation in Rafah immediately. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The media got it wrong. It wasn't the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last, that major news outlets rushed to publish headlines that were the opposite of the truth. Here's what really happened at the ICJ. The government of South Africa asked the ICJ to demand that Israel halt its military operations in Gaza and withdraw its forces, leaving Hamas on its feet and the hostages there. The ICJ rejected South Africa's request. However, the court used vague language in its ruling. This is the key part. The judges said that Israel must, and I quote, immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, end quote. Israel's response to this was to say, okay, we're not taking any action that could create such conditions. In fact, we're sending in massive amounts of humanitarian aid into Gaza in order to avoid such a reality. We're urging Palestinians to evacuate Hamas strongholds. To avoid such a reality, there's no need to halt our operations to bring down Hamas and bring back the hostages. We're going to destroy Hamas, obviously not the Palestinian people. That's why we're urging them to get out of harm's way. This is a war against Hamas, not the people of Gaza. In other words, the ICJ warned Israel not to do something that Israel is not doing anyway, and is obviously committed to not doing. This isn't just my opinion. That's how two of the judges who voted in favor of the ruling, Judge Nolter from Germany and Judge Aurescu from Romania, understood their own ruling. They said in black and white that the ruling simply isn't about Israeli actions that do not risk violating the Genocide Convention, and none of Israel's actions do risk that. One of the dissenting judges, Judge Julia Sebutinde from Uganda, was even more scathing in her criticism, and I encourage you to read her dissenting opinion in its entirety. She said the wording of the court's ruling could be misunderstood or misconstrued as ordering an indefinite unilateral ceasefire, and slammed the court for micromanaging the hostilities in Gaza, which isn't its job. In other words, the vice president of the ICJ said clearly that the ICJ did not order Israel to unilaterally cease its campaign. Judge ad hoc Aaron Barak of Israel also wrote a dissenting opinion that is worth reading in full. He said Israel is not prevented from carrying out its operation in Rafah against Hamas and to bring the hostages home, as long as Israel's operation doesn't violate the Genocide Convention, which it obviously does not. He blasted South Africa for not even mentioning the threat posed by Hamas or the situation of the hostages, which just goes to show that South Africa is acting as the legal arm of the Hamas terror organization. Sebutinde and Barak understood that the ICJ is politicized, biased, and overreaching. It's a political show trial. So the ICJ didn't actually tell Israel to stop the campaign to bring down Hamas and bring back the hostages, but it gave ammo to those who are demanding that Israel create a safe zone for Hamas to continue raping Israeli hostages in its terror dungeons. And it emboldened Hamas to escalate its attack on Israelis. Because Hamas read those headlines and it was encouraged to keep attacking Israel from Rafah, like it did just now with a missile attack on Tel Aviv. Israel has a right to defend itself from this threat on its people. And it's simply implausible to suggest that it is now illegal for Israel to neutralize the threat of missiles on Tel Aviv, or that it is illegal for Israel to try to rescue the hostages or put pressure on Hamas to release them. That's just not a plausible reading of what the ICJ said. But thanks to the ICJ's PR campaign, millions of people around the world now think that the ICJ ruled that Israel has no right to rescue its hostages in Rafah or to pursue the Hamas terror regime, and that is a mistake we have to push back against. The ICJ has turned itself into a kangaroo court conducting a political show trial. Exhibit A, the president of the court, Judge Nawaf Salam. Judge Salam is a former Lebanese diplomat. He was Lebanon's ambassador to the United Nations. He should have recused himself, and he must recuse himself immediately. Salam has publicly expressed his opinions about Israel many times. He's told lies about Israel, he's voted against Israel at the United Nations, he's written social media posts condemning Israel, he even promoted the views of Marwan Barghouti, a Palestinian terrorist serving 5 life sentences in Israeli prison for terrorism offenses. A judge who has publicly attacked the defendant cannot be a fair judge in any court in the world. Judge Salam must recuse himself immediately, and all fair-minded people and states must demand that the president of the ICJ recuse himself from what is obviously a show trial. Think about what it means to have a Lebanese judge preside in a case about Israel. In Lebanon, there is a terror army called Hezbollah. Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government. Hezbollah has been attacking Israel every day since October 8th at the behest of its Iranian warlord patrons. If Nawaf Salam ruled clearly in Israel's favor, he wouldn't be safe in Lebanon to go home, and everyone knows it. The International Court of Justice is meant to be a pillar of the post-World War II rules-based international order. And I'm not sure that the ICJ's reputation survives this political theater, which only serves to protect Hamas and harm Israel's right to self-defense. The media should stop playing along with this farce and see the ICJ for what it is. There's another part of the ICJ ruling that I want to address. The court required that Israel keep the RAFAH border crossing open. The RAFAH border crossing between Egypt and Gaza. Once again, the ICJ ordered Israel to do something that it is already trying to do, and someone should tell the judges that there is another country on the other side of the RAFAH crossing. That country is Egypt. Egypt closed the RAFAH crossing. Egypt has been blocking aid from entering Gaza. The ICJ ruling, though, said nothing about Egypt. Does the ICJ want Israel to invade Egypt in order to force it to open the crossing? Last Friday, after 2 weeks of blocking aid from entering Gaza, Egypt agreed, under US pressure, to let back aid into Gaza, but not through the Rafah crossing, only to let it reach Israel so it can go through the Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza. It's the same Kerem Shalom crossing that Hamas regularly attacks. It happened last week. Hamas fired rockets at the crossing during a time when Israel was getting humanitarian aid workers out of Gaza and bringing them into Gaza. And they had to duck for cover under their bus because Hamas was trying to attack humanitarian aid workers as they entered the Gaza Strip. Did you hear about it? Why not? Ask humanitarian aid agencies why they are covering up the fact that Hamas is attacking the humanitarian aid crossings while continue to attack Israel. Now, by issuing this nonsensical ruling, the ICJ is in effect giving Hamas strategic military advice. This is what the ICJ is telling Hamas. If you hide hostages in Rafah, concentrate your forces in Rafah, use your own people as human shields in Rafah, and fire missiles at Tel Aviv from Rafah, the ICJ will pressure Israel to give you a safe zone and leave you alone. The ICJ has it backwards. It's Hamas that needs to be pressured. It is Hamas's allies and backers, Turkey, Qatar, and Iran, that must be pressured. Israel is not going to stop its just war, which Hamas started with the October 7th massacre and abduction of 252 hostages. Israel will not give up its goals to bring back all 125 hostages who are rotting in the Hamas terror dungeons, to destroy Hamas's military, to remove Hamas from power, and to ensure that Gaza can never again threaten Israel. Thank you for following us now on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, whatever social media platform you're following us. We'll now take questions. As always, please feel free to submit questions in the comments, whatever social media platform you're following, and we'll be able to take your questions live. Who's first, please?
Randy Perry asks from our Instagram live just now, how long is it expected to take to search out and eliminate all the rocket launchers from Rafa or Gaza in general?
It's an excellent question. The IDF believes that Rafa is the last place in the Gaza Strip where Hamas still has a serious stockpile of weapons. And that's because in the course of this war, Israel has moved from north to south and dismantled Hamas's military machine. It's destroyed the weapons manufacturing facilities, which means that Hamas cannot create new rockets, but it still has rockets in Rafa. Israel doesn't have a timeline for how long the operation in Rafa will take, but it has targets. Those targets are to destroy Hamas's governing and military capabilities and to bring back the hostages. It'll take as long as it has to take. It will take longer than it could because Israel is committed to the principles of international law, the need to keep civilians safe, protected, out of harm's way. And that is why Israel is urging them to get out of a Hamas stronghold where Hamas is trying to use them as human shields. And the sooner that civilians join those who have already evacuated, preferably if the UN were to help them get out of the way, then Israel can face down against Hamas and dismantle its military machine, so we never again have rockets at Tel Aviv or the same sort of mortar fire that terrorized the residents of the Gaza border area for 2 decades before the October 7th massacre.
The Red Alert app is indicating almost every day that there are rocket sirens in the north. What's happening on the northern border?
On October 7th, Hamas declared war on Israel with the October 7th massacre. Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy army in Lebanon, joined that war on October 8th. Since then, every day it has been firing rockets at northern Israel. Every day. It has forced the evacuation of tens of thousands of Israeli civilians who cannot go home. They cannot go home because it's not safe and because many of those homes don't exist because they are being shelled. October 7th was the beginning of a regional war, and Israel is under attack on 8 fronts. From the death squads of Gaza, from Palestinian terrorists in the West Bank, from the Iranian proxy army Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Syria, from Iraqi militias, from Iranian militias in Iraq. Just the other day, we shot down drones coming from Iraq, from Iran itself, from Yemen, and I say 8 because I include attacks on Jews across the diaspora. Israel has been warning Hezbollah for months, back off or we will force you to get pushed away. Under UN Security Council Resolution 1701 from 2006, which ended the Second Lebanon War, Hezbollah is supposed to go north of the Litani River, away from Israel's border. But it hasn't done that because Hezbollah is part of the Lebanese government. It controls southern Lebanon. It's the only military force in southern Lebanon. And since October 8th, it has been attacking Israel non-stop. And Israel is now warning it. You are going to have to move away, as you have to under international law, or we will be forced to use military pressure to make you back off because our citizens have to go back safely to their homes. For 8 months, they have been refugees in their own country, stranded in hotels and guest houses around the country. That has to end. They have to go home.
There are 2 related questions right now on our Instagram Live. Bob Luck asks, what incentives are leading Egypt to keep the Rafah crossing closed? And Susie Schwartz asks, what's with Egypt allowing all the weapons to go through the tunnels?
That's an excellent question. Egypt pressured Israel not to enter Rafah, and as soon as it went in, we found the reason why. Israel discovered 50 tunnels, at least 50 tunnels, crossing from Rafah into Egyptian territory. Now, years ago, Egypt tried to destroy the tunnels, and it raised the whole of the Egyptian side of Rafah, creating a sterile military zone. It isn't plausible that Hamas had tunnels going into Egypt, and the Egyptian government or intelligence services didn't know about it. These are tunnels that Hamas used to smuggle weapons into Gaza, and which it could use to smuggle its leaders and, God forbid, hostages out of Gaza. So it isn't surprising that an Israeli offensive in Rafah is deeply embarrassing for the Egyptians, and they're trying to use pressure to try to get Israel out of there. Who knows what else Israel might find out? But it goes deeper than that. There was a report in the Israeli media just this weekend that Egypt is furious at the new American humanitarian aid port to get aid into Gaza by sea. Why? Because Egyptian officials are getting corrupt kickbacks from every truck that goes through Rafah. They are benefiting from the delivery of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and that is why they are not happy that Israel has been opening new crossings into the Gaza Strip. Frankly, since Israel has been under attack for blocking aid into Gaza when it's been letting it in, it's been really disappointing to see that the world hasn't criticized or publicly attacked Egypt for blockading Rafah, for not letting aid trucks reach Kerem Shalom. And there needs to be more pressure on Egypt to allow aid to get into the Gaza Strip. If there's one lesson we've learned from the last 8 months, you must not use food and humanitarian aid for leverage in a war. The civilians in Gaza need aid. That's why it's coming through Israel, and it needs to come from Rafah as well.
A question from Shiri on Instagram. Recently in the UK, there was a cinema vandalized ahead of a screening of a film about the Nova Music Festival massacre. What is your opinion about this?
It's really horrific to see people trying to cover up the evidence of Hamas's atrocities on October 7th. And by the way, I was encouraged to see the counter-protests that came against it, as Jews and allies in the local area said, no, we are not going to allow the vandalism of a cinema that is trying to show evidence of Hamas's atrocities. Since October 7th, the pro-Hamas mob has been denying, downplaying, or glorifying the atrocities. They glorify the atrocities because they agree with them, because they genuinely believe in that slogan, by all means necessary, that there's no such thing as an Israeli civilian, that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. But other people have been denying those atrocities. And that's because they know that if you see what Hamas did on October 7th, how it burned whole families alive, how it raped Israeli women. We had today on the State of a Nation podcast, Jonathan Dekel-Chen from near Oz, who spoke of a neighbor of his who had her head smashed in with a sledgehammer. If you know the truth of what Hamas did on October 7th, then obviously Israel has a right to go after Hamas, to neutralize that threat, and to dismantle it. And if you want this war to end with Hamas on its feet, because you agree with Hamas, then you have to cover up the fact there are hostages. That's why they tear down hostage posters. And you have to cover up the atrocities Hamas did on October 7th, because all sensible people around the world know that after October 7th, Israel has no choice but to fight to bring back the hostages and to bring down Hamas, because no country can ever tolerate such atrocities against its people, while Hamas threatens to do that again and again until Israel is destroyed.
Claudia asks, there are many non-Jews like me supporting Israel and showing solidarity to Jewish communities. Diaspora Jews and Israelis feel left alone, so apparently we're not doing enough. What do you need? How could we start a cooperation? Why do Jews and Israelis still feel alone?
First of all, Claudia, thank you. Many Israelis and Jews feel betrayed and isolated and abandoned as they see the world turning against Israel as it fights to bring back the hostages, but also the horrific wave of anti-Semitism around the world. A shooting against a girls' school in Toronto just the other day. Graffiti saying "Die Jew" on a high school in Melbourne. The other side is loud, it's aggressive, it's violent, and it's trying to scare people away from speaking up for Israel. And we need more supporters. And we need more supporters to stand with us, not only because Israel is fighting on the front lines of humanity, because no country should endure the atrocities we did on October 7th, but because Israel is fighting against the same fundamentalist extremists who want to attack the West as well. And when they say globalize the intifada, that's exactly what they mean. They want to escalate attacks on the West as well. And so standing with Israel isn't just about taking a clear moral stance. It's about protecting your own countries and your own liberal democracies as well from the people who want to subvert them and intimidate them from within. So there is so much that you can do. Help your Jewish friends put up hostage posters. They're afraid to do it because they think they might be attacked. Watch their backs. When there's a phone-in on the radio and people are talking about Israel, 9 out of 10 phone calls are from people attacking Israel and spreading Hamas propaganda. take a deep breath, pick up the phone yourself and speak up. Have difficult conversations with other people. When you're at the office by the water cooler and someone talks about Israel, speak up for Israel's right to bring back the hostages, to neutralize the Hamas terror threat, because no one in your country would tolerate non-stop missile fire at your cities, death squads spilling across to rape, pillage, burn, murder anyone they could. No country would put up with it. Israelis wouldn't either. We want the basic security that other people get, deserve, expect in Western countries, and we're not going to settle for any less. But again, thank you. Thank you for your support and solidarity.
Many people are asking the following 3 questions. How are you? How can we support you? And how can we join the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office?
All right, under the circumstances, thank you. How can you support us? First of all, tune in every day. Stay tuned. We're going to be here 3 o'clock Israel time, 8 a.m. Eastern time, on all major social media platforms. It's not going to be just me. We are building a team of citizen spokespeople here. And around that team, we are building a community. We want to create a one-stop shop where you can tune in every day, find out what you need to know, the points you need to know in order to fight back against the lies. So every time you share one of our stories or posts or tune in or tell your friends and neighbors to join, that helps us because it helps to amplify our message. And then we need you to take that message and run with it. How can you support the Citizen Spokesperson's office? If you're in Israel and you see yourself potentially as a citizen spokesperson, then you can reach out with a CV in the DMs of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office on Instagram and Twitter. We're building a team, but we really need you to amplify the messages that are coming out from here. So much of the truth about Israel simply isn't getting told in social media or the mainstream media. And we're giving you the ammunition that you need here in order to take the fight in your colleges, in your communities, in your schools, wherever it's happening. So please join us every day, Sunday to Thursday, 3 o'clock. And of course, if you missed it, we'll also be available on YouTube and the other platforms. Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to continue with another briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's office tomorrow. Please follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I think we're on LinkedIn as well, all the social media platforms. Thank you very much, everyone, and keep safe. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Debunks signing off.